All right. All right. Daydream, what do you think?
That's a great first question.
Yeah.
Clay got the hard last question. I got the good first question. No, in all honesty, you will hear the same thing from Clay, from us at Oculus, from the people at HTC. The more VR there is, the better. It's something that has to be experienced before you understand how great it is. You're not going to read an article and then go out and buy a VR setup. And so the fact that Daydream launched today, it's a year since Gear VR actually launched. We opened pre-orders a year to a day last year. And it's more exposure for people to get into VR. It's more users for developers to make content and make money. And one of the biggest challenges with building up this ecosystem from scratch is it's a two-sided market. So if you have too many users and not enough developers, you're going to end up with very little content. And the users will get bored, they'll churn out, and they're probably gone for a little while. If you have all this content but no users, you've got the opposite problem. Developers aren't getting paid, and they go on to greener pastures. And so you really have to build these things up in concert. In the Gear VR ecosystem, we now have actually over 400 applications. There's another 100 coming before the end of the year. And I think having more people to get exposed to VR is actually a positive for all of us.
Are we at the beginning, though, of a format war or a platform war that, similar to Android, iOS, Windows, and who's Windows here?
Yeah, we're going back further, right? VHS, beta.
HD DVD.
There you go. There's lots of these. The great thing is that most of the content now is made with these generalized game engines like Unity or Unreal. And I think over 90% of the applications on our store are actually Unity-based applications. And it's pretty straightforward for a developer to just click a button and then output to different types of platforms. And so you're going to find a lot of content that plays nicely no matter what hardware it is. And that's a good thing for people and for developers.
The inputs are rather similar, right?
Yeah, so the input differs across these platforms, actually. And so there will be some things that are made specifically for one platform versus another. But in general, the gameplay and the activities, especially the more passive experiences, those will work everywhere. And you hear a lot about video in VR. I'd like to think of it as active or passive VR. Active VR is where you're interacting with that content. It's waiting for you to do something. Passive VR, you can sit back a little bit more. It might be video, or it might be an experience that triggers where you look. And so it doesn't take as much cognitive load to go through this. It's actually a lot more relaxing to do a passive experience than an active experience. And so you're going to see a lot of differentiation. The higher end platforms on PC like Rift and Vive, they're really going to excel with some of this active VR where you feel like you're in the game. The tagline for Rift is step into Rift because you're really in this magical world. And on mobile, we actually see about a 50-50 split right now, where 50% of our users are spending most of their time on passive, and the other 50% is doing it on the active side.
And is there a specific time of day or time of week that people choose one or the other?
Yeah, I think implicit in there is a question about do users have multiple types of VR, right? I think that's kind of where you're saying, are you saying choosing active or passive?
Active or passive?
Yeah. I haven't looked
passive at nighttime and actives during the day? I don't know.
I'm sure our data analysts are thrilled you brought that up because they're probably going to have to go do some more work tonight. But no, I think that that's a little bit of micro optimization, so we're not trying to look too much into that. I will tell you this. Gear VR is very heavily used on the weekends. In a lot of consumer electronics devices, you have the opposite. But partially that's because it is a headset that you have to have with you, and you're not going to have it with you all the time. So you use it at night and on weekends. And we see huge spikes in usage on holidays because it's something that people love to share with their friends. They want to take it to their families when they go back for the holidays and show them this new content. And that's one of the first ways we knew that we had built something interesting. It's not just for people to use in their house, but they really want to share it.
That's interesting. Talking about the discovery problem, I was at the airport yesterday, and first thing I saw after security was a storefront that said Facebook. That seemed unusual, so I walked up to it, and it's a giant Oculus Mobile demo pit, basically at JFK. That seems new. Is that something you're doing more of?
Yeah, I'm actually not familiar with that particular activation, but it goes back to the main theme of having to try it to really understand. And that actually held true for me as well. I was working at Google a few years ago in Los Angeles, and Brendan, the CEO of Oculus, said, hey, come on down, meet Nate, my co-founder. I want to show you this awesome thing that we're working on. And the idea of driving from LA to Irvine was like so crazy, that's so far away, that I refused to go for about a month. And I'm like, oh, I've heard you've been very successful with this Kickstarter, but I don't know too much about VR. And so I finally actually went down there. And as soon as I put it on, I completely understood why they were so passionate about it. And so you have to do airport activations. You have to do mall kiosks. You have to make sure that friends have a good, easy experience to share it with other friends and family members, or else this product won't take off, because it's not something that can sell itself yet, just because you really have to experience it.
Do you remember your first VR experience?
I do, yeah.
What was it?
So I'll tell you a couple things. There was one thing, it was one of the early, one of the Oculus co-founders actually out there right now, so he probably remembers this too, but it was something called Hawking, and there was this neat little experience with some robots, and then I was climbing up a volcano and lava, and I thought this was cool, but what really took me was this very early prototype of what became Gear VR. And it was a Galaxy S4 phone with a sensor hot glued on the back of it. And you put it into a 3D printed headset. And I'm like, what is this crazy thing? Because before we were hooked up to these really big computers, I put it on my head, and it was just a 360 panoramic photo with a big rectangle cut out in the sky playing a clip from a movie. And as soon as I watched it, I got it. Because I knew that rather than sitting in bed and playing the TV and bothering my wife who's telling me to turn the damn thing off, I could actually be in my own world there and experience that. But then the next step is to do that socially. So I travel a lot. I'm in hotels. I'm away from my son. I'm away from my wife. And instead, what if you could watch together, where we could get the sense as if we're still talking? I talk way too much during movies and TV. She complains about it all the time. I want to put that on her even when I'm out of the town as well. And then if you expand beyond that kind of 2D stuff to 360, earlier today I was, but right before I came over here, my son hopped up on the couch, started staying on the couch and started barking like our dog. And he just kept it, and I was like, Quinn, what are you doing? He's like, I'm like Simba, I'm like Simba. And that was just a moment that I could text my mom about. But if I had a consumer-grade 360 camera where I could capture that, it's not a home movie, it's a home memory. And the great thing about that is my grandmother is 95 years old and in a nursing home. It sounds like Clay has said that 2018 is the year of grandmas, so maybe this is when the product will come out. But yeah, my grandmother might not buy a Gear VR, but my mom and dad have one. And they can go visit her and bring it, and you can get access to that very intimate, empathetic scene. And it's a far different experience than if you're just watching a quick video that looks about that. I mean, when I first started thinking about VR a couple years ago, I realized that creators of media don't think in a rectangle. They think like this. They think in an imagination of an entire world that goes all around them. And sure, you can do things even with 360 video on a phone now, where you can hold it up and move it around and kind of see different things of the scene. But you want to be free. You want to have the agency to look around and see things yourself. And VR is by far the best playback mechanism to be able to translate that creative vision.
What is the lineup right now? What is your business now in mobile?
What do you mean by lineup?
What's your product lineup? What do you sell now?
Yeah, so our main product on the mobile world is Gear VR. And the cool thing about that is we partnered with Samsung, for those of you who don't know. And we weren't sure quite what to expect, to be honest. Mobile VR, there was this Innovator Edition, which was designed for developers that came out before the Rift. And so there was a lot of interest in the VR landscape from what Oculus has been planning with the Rift. But we actually put this device out in the market and then launched it a year ago in about 2 weeks from now. We've already got millions of users. We've got over 400 apps in there, like I mentioned. There's a lot more coming. And one of the stat that really blows my mind is we've got far over 20 million hours that have been spent in VR. And if you just think about it, that's like a lot of time for people to be in this magical world. They're enjoying it, they're coming back, and that number is growing rapidly. And that just shows that we've got a product that has some possibilities. Now, it's not perfect by any means. And so where you're looking at the future, all we've kind of talked about right now is the Santa Cruz prototype. It's a feature prototype that demonstrates what we call inside-out tracking, but it's a standalone device. So in this case, you're not limited to the phone. You've actually got the similar computation of a phone on the headset as well, but you can move through the world freely. So you can actually walk forward, walk to the side, and there's cameras on the headset that sample the environment. And you have a one-to-one mapping of where you are in the virtual world to where you are in the physical world as well. And so I kind of think of VR as having three main areas. There's mobile VR, which will always be the most accessible way to get in there. It's going to be the most affordable. It's going to excel at the passive VR experiences. There's going to be some neat active VR experiences. We have Minecraft, which blows your mind on Gear VR. It's a lot of fun. There's going to be PC VR. A lot of people think about the holodeck. You're not going to start with a mobile phone to get the holodeck. You're going to start with a high-powered computer. You're probably going to have external sensors, Connect version 8, for instance, that gives you that sense of being able to transform the space you're in. It's going to cost some money. And so you're going to probably need a higher-end PC to run that. And so PC VR is going to be very important and give that ultimate experience to the people that are interested in it. Then you're going to have a very wide middle of standalone devices. Some that might be what we call orientation only, meaning similar to Daydream and Gear VR, there's no position tracking. Others that are probably even more expensive than the PC that are used in the enterprise world that transform the way you do business. But this standalone market segment, we think in time is going to be incredibly important to get this device in the hands of hundreds of millions of people.
How big of a setback was the Note 7 recall for you?
Yeah, look, that was unfortunate. I think Samsung responded in the right way. We actually didn't see much drop in usage. I mean, we had a lot of people who had Note 7 switch to the S7 and are planning to then go into the S8 and to the Note 8. I like to think a lot of the people who stayed in the Samsung ecosystem did it partially because of Gear VR and wanted to.
So you use the same headset with.
Yeah, the same headset plugs in with the different phones. And so our biggest concern was just consumer safety. And,
sure. Yeah, a fire on your face is a little different than in a. You probably don't want to talk about that.
What's next, Dan?
Okay. So what do people like? What do you like?
Yeah, so I'll tell you what I don't like, which is horror experiences. So not that first time I went down, they convinced me enough that this was so cool, I actually moved to Irvine, which I don't recommend to many people. But so I started working at Oculus, and I don't know if it was a hazing ritual, but one of the younger engineers said, hey, you should try this game, and it's something called Dread Halls, which probably should have been the first tip-off. So I'm sitting down in the middle of the office, and it was basically one big room was the entirety of Oculus at this time. And I'm playing Dread Halls, and you're running through these narrow corridors, and there's things chasing at you, and if you look at them, they stop, and if you look away, they start coming faster. About 30 seconds later, I ripped off the headset, started screaming at the top of my lungs, and there's engineers who are like typing coding, look over, they're like, oh, he's playing Dread Halls. And then they go back to what they're doing. So I personally, when our company is working with developers and making horror games and they want me to try it, I kind of fake it. I put it on my head, I close my eyes. They don't know because they've got the headset on. I'm like, oh yeah, this is really scary. Oh, there might be a little bug there. Let's see, going. And then, yeah, okay, that was cool, guys. Thanks, that was really great. But I did try something called Face Your Fears, which I think some of you might have tried. It's out here. And the activity levels of Face Your Fears is crazy because people are playing it, they're playing it again, they're making all their friends play it. You fall, there's a big robot that attacks you and you fall off these huge heights. In another situation, there's like a creepy demon baby thing and a clown. It gets really weird. But there's
I'm noticing a pattern here. Why do you
creepy
think
demon babies?
Yeah,
noticed a pattern.
Horror
lots of creepy demon babies.
Well, it just seems like there's a lot of this horror stuff in VR.
Yeah.
And
well,
is that,
so I think
why do you think that is? Is that the right emotion for being in a dark place?
You and Clay were talking about the empathy machine a little bit, and I think that VR lets you feel in a very strong way. And horror is one of those cheap ways to tick a box of making people feel. The other side of that is things like Clouds Over Sidra was mentioned, but there have been a number of documentaries that have been done where it is topical to now, is understanding people who have a different worldview than you. I think that VR is by far the best way to do it. One good example of that is The Guardian put together something called 6x9, which was about solitary confinement. And it was a discussion of people sharing their experiences, but you were sitting in this cell while it happened. And as you look around, you see scrawling on the wall of what people have actually done, and you hear news reports about people who have died in solitary confinement or have had mental breakdowns. And I think that just having that conversation at an intellectual level is something very reasonable to have, and you can formulate an opinion. But VR gives you the ability to experience that in a completely different way. And I know that I feel more informed when I'm having debates about something that I've had a way to experience. And actually, let me take that a step farther. One of the best things about VR, I think, is going to be the impact it has on education. Entertainment is without a doubt the most used area that VR is used for. And I think that will actually fade in time. That there will absolutely be people wanting to use it to get away or to have fun or to play games, and that will be a pretty big market. But in terms of transforming the world, I can imagine an application where you're talking to Watson and you're asking it questions and it's giving you answers. And if you stop right there, that's really stupid, right? Because why not just go to a web page? Or why not just use voice control and talk to it that way and then get the answers? And that's absolutely right. And you shouldn't build VR just to make it VR. But what if after you talk to Watson, it then completely changes the world around you? And you say, Watson, when were the pyramids built? And you can look at a Wikipedia page, maybe even with a video embedded, and get a sense of the time and the atmosphere. But if you have this VR landscape, you can actually create the world, create the answers, and learn so much better. And I think back to, I use my Kindle fairly often, and I wanted to read a book that wasn't available on Kindle because there was a rights fight about it. And so I had to order the old paperback, and I was annoyed. I had to wait 2 days, comes in the mail, I start reading it. And about 10 minutes after I'm reading it, I come to a word I don't know, and I run my finger along the word, and nothing happens. Because sure enough, in the real world, you can't look up definitions with just your finger. So I laugh at myself. I turn about 12 more pages. I did the same damn thing again. Like my brain has been so trained. Kindle has changed the way I read that the idea of reading without doing it on my Kindle just doesn't work to me. I think that VR is going to do that with education. I don't think you will have textbooks for teenagers in schools in a decade. I think you're going to have VR and other forms of experiential learning because you will learn so much more and you'll remember it much better.
So Kindle's changed the way you read. Have you noticed that VR has changed the way you do anything?
That's a really good question. I would say the answer right now is no. I don't think that we are at a stage where it has completely transformed any of my current habits. And I think that's why we're a platform company, because what's going to show the way is the content. So the Kindle Reader, and actually, I mean, that exact example was the ability to look up a word, right? That is something that the engineers at Amazon decided to add with this motion, and they executed it really well. At Oculus, we do build some of our own content, but our company is a platform company where we want to enable developers to come up with amazing stuff and do it themselves. And so we work closely with Unity and Unreal, the engines I talked about. And I think that in the next few years, I would like to come back to that question because I do honestly think the answer will be yes.
How much time do you spend a day?
In VR?
Yeah.
So I'm in VR a lot because I'm testing a lot of things.
Sure.
I will say that on average, I probably have some days with no VR, and I have some days with an hour or more. And I think that you're going to see usage patterns like that for a while. It's not. I pull my phone out of my pocket, I don't know, 142 times a day. We're not going to.
That's it?
That's it.
That's low.
It's actually 373. I didn't want to
right.
embarrass myself, but thanks for
Yeah.
calling me out. So I think that VR has the potential to get there, but we're many years off before it is that replaceable.
What drives you crazy that you're just like, I need this to be 10 times better, and and it's my job to make that happen. But
so for those of you who are familiar with who's at Oculus and some of the personalities, our CTO is a guy named John Carmack. If you would ask him that question, it would be like 7 hours later before he walks off the stage because you'd have so many things. For me, honestly, it's early enough that there aren't any things that I'm just like, I keep seeing this over and over again and people keep doing it wrong because there is no right way to do things. We have to learn, and when we do, we're going to shout that message from the rooftop so that everyone can do it as well.
How about hardware-wise? Do the pixels drive you nuts, or any of the limitations right now?
Yeah, so on that, we absolutely need to have the hardware improve, and we have a problem because right now we're bootstrapped off of phones. And you can imagine having a 4K screen on a cell phone instead of the 1440p at the top-end phones right now. But you're not going to tell much difference at this length between a 4K and a 1440p. I don't know why you would have a 6K, an 8K, a 12K, or a 16K screen, but we need that for VR. And so we've had the reason VR is so affordable, accessible at $99 with Gear VR right now is that we've been able to bootstrap off of mobile technology, but you need that to shift. And you need to start having the display companies and some of the other component vendors work directly for VR, and that's going to happen really, really soon because they're all eager. But that's why I think standalone can really shine. Because when you're freed from the constraints of this multi-use device of your phone also being your VR machine, you can do some additional things.
Where are the most interesting and successful developers coming from? Are they coming from mobile or from the entertainment world, or are they first-time developers?
It's a great question. So there's a little company called Microsoft that made Minecraft, and Minecraft's doing really well.
They didn't make Minecraft.
That's a very good point. Mojang made Minecraft, and Microsoft and Mojang worked together to do the Gear VR one. That's a very good point. And all the way down to one of my favorite games I played in the beginning was something called Keep Talking and Nobody Explodes. And the first time I hopped on a video conference with them, there was 3 guys who were finishing up their college degrees and wanted to build this application where it was something that was very social. And one person has to defuse a bomb in a headset, and the others that are around him in real life without headsets on have a manual, a bomb diffusion manual. And there's a number of strange symbols and things that the person who's in VR can see, but no one else can. So that person describes it, and everyone else has to help guide to solve the puzzles. And that was a great indie success, which has done very well on Steam for PC and on Gear VR as well. So you're going to have the gamut of these things. There's some big Hollywood companies like Fox that have done amazing pieces with The Martian and The Wild and some other movie companion pieces. And then you've got Felix and Paul Studios, which are 2 amazing guys from Montreal. They've built up a company now. They've done Cirque du Soleil Ka. A lot of you can see it here. It's their demos. And it's really, you're going to run the gamut. Where I think the next big initiatives you're going to see in VR are actually going to be on the social side. So VR is not isolating because it actually brings all your friends and family to you. So I am talking on Messenger all the time to a number of friends, and we've got these group discussions going on. And yeah, you're typing as you're walking around, and asynchronous messaging works great. But if we can all hop in and get the sense that we're there with each other, that's really transformative. I was doing a demo of Rift and Touch and something called Toybox, and to a friend of mine who works at Apple, and he just started randomly laughing, and I asked him why he was laughing. He said that even without hearing my voice, just seeing the way my hands were moving, he knew it was me. With this avatar, I looked like someone, like a reject from the Blue Man Group at the time. And so now we're adding all these customization options where you can bring your personality with over 1 billion permutations. That's coming to Rift very soon as Touch launches in the next few weeks. And it's going to be on mobile as well, because at Oculus, when we build stuff, we don't build for Rift or for Gear. We build for VR, and then we find the best ways to put them on both platforms. And so I think this ability to have these social interactions is really going to be the next big wave of VR. And you're going to see some incredible innovation from, frankly, probably some pretty small developers in the next year or so.
And is the main use case social across the internet with someone somewhere else, or is it that I can't never forget that Zuckerberg photo of him walking through the sea of thousands of people sitting next to each other in the dark with headsets on? Is that the use case?
Fun side note about that. I was there, and they had said before they started that whole show, they said if you have a problem with the Gear VR, raise your hand when we start that aspect of it, and we'll have someone come by and help you out. And so sure enough, there's 5,000 of them that are synchronized. And when they started that moment, I took my headset off because I'm like, I want to see what % of these are actually failing. I didn't see anyone's hand raised. So kudos to Samsung and whoever they worked with on that one to pull that off. But I think that you've kind of hit on the fact that there's a number of ways that it will be social. I don't think you're going to have big rooms full of people wearing VR headsets. We should have set that up for party. Fun. Yeah, but yeah. I think that for me, it's that VR breaks down barriers of time and space. And so you're going to have people that are all around the world in a very low latency environment that have richer interactions than they could with their phones or with their tablets. And that's really what social VR means to me. I do think it's going to be mostly friends start, and you're going to have to do a lot of things asynchronously as well, because the social graph of people simultaneously in VR, just as a function of the number of people that have VR, is going to be small. And so it's on us at Oculus to deliver these amazing experiences that want to make people go into VR together. And we've actually got some really exciting things coming out in the next few weeks. Before 2016 is over, I think that we're going to start showing that that's here to stay.
Great. Last question, then we'll take audience questions. A clever trick of mine during my career has been to befriend the head of mobile at any company, because soon they're running the whole company.
What do you need?
What's that path? Is mobile the future of all VR that we're going to be buying at a consumer level, or is it a sideshow?
So mobile is, I think, the mass market. The PC aspect I talked about, that holodeck experience, we'd like to think that mobile computation trails PC by a couple years or trails mainframes and a lot of things. It's actually more than that. There are decisions that are made for a mobile form factor around power, around batteries, around weight, around cost that you don't exactly catch up to what you have if you have a broader base to start from. So I do think that both these things are going to live on. That being said, I think that either mobile, what we call drop-in, which is Gear VR and Daydream, or the standalone form factor, is how you're going to get this in the hands of hundreds of millions and billions of people. One of the reasons that Mark Zuckerberg was interested in Oculus was the Facebook mission is to connect the world. And with Oculus, that's another way to build a great computing platform that can help you connect the world with people all over the place. I think you're going to have a mobile form factor to do that.
Great. Couple questions, and then we'll send you all home.
We're between them and cocktails right now.
I'll let Stephen go, and then I got one for you.
All right.
You talked about partnerships. Right now you have Samsung. The Daydream guys have a longer list. Do you think you need to have more than Samsung on board? Do you want to expand that with other partnerships, other handset makers?
Yeah, it's a fantastic question.
And when?
The reason we partnered with Samsung is because at the time they were the ones who had this high-end phone hardware, but they also had these OLED screens that are fantastic. More manufacturers have it now, but in the process of working with Samsung, we have been absolutely floored by how well this relationship has gone. So I mentioned that we have millions of users. You can add up a lot of the other phone makers that have OLED phones if you don't include Samsung, and it's hard to get to those types of numbers. So from my perspective, the relationship that we have with Samsung's committed to Gear VR, we're committed to Samsung, and that's something that I expect to continue to lead and flourish for quite some time.
I'm going to follow up on Stephen's too. Samsung may be committed to Oculus, but they're also committed to what Clay's doing with Daydream. Do the same phones, do you see them popping into both devices? Do you see it being different phones? Because Samsung doesn't seem to be as committed to you as you are to them.
Burn.
I'm glad you were talking to me today, and not no. In all honesty, that's mostly a question for Samsung. What I would tell you, what I would say again is to reiterate a little bit. You're going to find Samsung's VR is Gear VR for the next few years, and that will manifest in a number of ways. The Samsung relationship is not just a licensing deal or a partnership. It's actually a lot deeper than that. It's a lot of technology that we're working with each other on, and I think you're going to continue to see that grow in a number of ways.
Let's do one more.
Okay. Hi. In hearing you talk about some of the things that are required for a great VR experience, I mean, I hear you talk about things like it's this amazingly immersive experience, but Clay talked a little bit about how expensive it can be to produce. It requires special equipment, and it requires special equipment on part of the consumer to experience it. I can't help but think a little bit about 3D. And for a while, 3D was going to be the next big thing in entertainment, and then it sort of never, got there. And now it's maybe an ancillary feature in some TVs, but you don't see people sitting around on their couches wearing 3D glasses, right? And so do you think there's any chance that a few years from now we might be looking at VR in a completely different way because those barriers to accessibility are so great?
Are you a flash in the pan?
I'm really glad you were hearing right there. No, a year ago, my answer would have been different. So a year ago, if I was being honest, the answer is absolutely. That's something that we worry about, and we do our best to make sure that doesn't happen. I think that what you're seeing now with Microsoft, with Sony, with Google, with Facebook and Oculus, and all of us invested in that, it's because we actually don't think that's the case, and we're starting to have data to back that up. We're starting to see how much people actually use this. We have millions of users. And you also, more importantly, have hundreds of millions of dollars that has been invested in content, and that's going to continue to grow. That's actually $250 million that Facebook alone has previously invested in content. And Mark mentioned at Oculus Connect a few weeks ago, our developer conference, that Facebook plans to invest $250 million more over the next few years. And if you don't have good content, this product would completely disappear. Because at the end of the day, if you don't have a reason to go back to it, it's over. It's done. I don't think that's the case. When I go out, when I talk to users, when I look at what people are doing, when I see how much they're using the device, I think that we've actually jumped that part of the chasm in some ways. And while we are so far away from mass market mainstream adoption and having this in the hands of everyone and making the value proposition so clear, it's not even a matter of seeing the path. We're actually on that path. And so I think it's a lot different than before we launched, when we harbored a lot of those fears.
So you feel very confident that VR is not the next 3D?
Yeah, and I think that 3D never really hit the types of impact to users, right, that you see with what VR. You had people that bought 3D TVs because they were buying new TVs, but you didn't have 3D fanatics. You didn't have these communities. You didn't have this enthusiasm. And you didn't have a lot of content that was being developed purely for the home 3D market. 3D actually is incredibly successful in movies. The ticket prices are higher, studios like it, they make more money, and they get a return on investment. But it didn't make sense in the home. VR, because of the empathy, because of the social features that we're building in, I do not think this is 3D.